So in the YouTube, we have these records available, and actually we are getting good views of our past programs. I think so not all of them is reflected on the public, but internally we see that we reach couple 20, 30,000 levels. It's pretty popular. I'm happy that it got a good traction. So what we want to do is basically we bring people from different backgrounds. We have academicians. I mean, we have people from companies, corporates. We have startups. So we try to give a different view every week on AI and health. And once we start to do that, we see it's like an ocean. You can do so much, and there's so much going on. It's just we like to give some insights to people. We like to bring people attention to different components. Because like I say that half of our audience from meetup groups, we have meetup groups in 4 or 5 regions, and we have over 8,000 members itself there. There are 60% of them is data scientists. And many of them like to get an AI in healthcare, but many of them don't know where to start. And those are the people who have already great training in AI. Some of them also like to get trained in AI. So I think this is a great insight, and I get feedback from first couple that so many people say, "Oh, this is great. I know where to start from." And some people say, oh, "There's a great startup ideas there." Especially there are great ideas coming in. But it really takes a unique collaboration to make this happen. That's what we're gonna hear from you today, your experience in there. So besides, I will do brief introduction about everyone. So we are, every week we are hosting with Chirag and Ryan. We are colleagues from Stanford. We used to be postdoc, and we are actually doing different roles in professional life now, but still doing in the same area. And so I will start with the Jochen. I hope I'm saying it right. We were discussing about how to say it. I ask everyone to have their predictions, but Chirag denied to predict, guess how it is pronounced. So his company, he's the CEO of Pr3vent. Pr3vent, I would say it like what you can say it. How do you say it? Pr3vent. That company is focused on detect and prevent vision loss in newborns, with the belief that AI diagnostic will help to make this practice and other medical services affordable and personalized to general public. Before this, his career has taken him to stints as the director of the Stanford Genome Technology Center, so and head of healthcare at IBM Research Africa. And this actually, I'm really interested in your experience in there as well. And he's also a founding member of StarTech Stanford. So we will actually go more deep in his experience. And Dr. Ryan is a deputy director in Precision Health and Integrative Diagnostic Center. I call it PINE. Maybe Ryan can correct it later. And he's also co-director in Canary Center for Cancer Early Detection at Stanford University. He was postdoc with us at Stanford, and he worked in MRI diagnostic tools for oncology. And he's involved in several research studies. He has several awards in different areas, imaging, and he's now more involved in the AI space. And Dr. Chirag is assistant professor in neurology and radiology at Stanford University. He has a BS biomedical engineering from Johns Hopkins, MD, PhD from University of Texas, and he did his residency at UCLA. And his lab, which also I am collaborating with him there, is in charge of researching electric field therapy and glioblastoma as a way to improve delivery of therapy to brain tumors. And now he's doing a lot of AI research to understand and maybe to help in therapy of glioblastoma. So I myself, I am the co-founder of Smart Lens and Magnimind Academy. And Smart Lens, we are building contact lens for eye pressure measurement. That's why we have some common space with Jochen. So what we do is we do microfluidic contact lens, non-electronics, to measure the IOP, especially first targeting the glaucoma patients. So I hope this introduction is good. I just wanna start with Jochen, and then wanna hear his company, what is he doing, and he can maybe elaborate his background, why he just shifted to AI in healthcare, why you started that endeavors.
All right. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I'll try to make it short, but I am very proud of Pr3vent, and I think we're doing something useful. In the context of your introduction, it's a company that's very much driven by a clinical need, and then we basically built the technology around that. And so the issue is this one. Babies are born, you screen for hearing, for instance, very little is done to look at the eyes. The reason is it's actually difficult to do and expensive and time consuming. And there are very few people who can do that. So when you see that list, right, it's difficult to do, very few people who can do that, etc. You sort of start to realize that might be an AI problem that could survive or be useful in the real world. And so what Pr3vent intends to do is essentially, you can take an image of the newborn eye. In the newborn ward, within a couple of days after being born, no extra trips, etc., for the parents. And it's the back of the eye, the retina, complex tissue layered, full of information. From a data scientist point of view, the retina is just a wealth of information. And then, since there are no people to do this and no people to look through a microscope into the baby's eyes, we sent this into the cloud, and we've built an artificial intelligence classifier, neural network based, and it will return within seconds, really, whether there's anything of concern, particularly hemorrhages in the center of the eye where your vision really takes place. And that's good enough for the person in the clinic to then make a decision. Really simple story. I think commercially, from a startup point of view, you're looking for really simple stories that you can get through regulatory and that actually are useful in the clinic. So, and so I hope that makes sense. Baby is born, image is taken, AI gives you information, clinically actionable information. And that's important because 5%, 4 to 5% of babies are born with that. They should be seen by someone. And the other reason it's important is because in the first 6 months, you can cure things that can no longer be cured later on. Like kids show up in kinder. This is how the company got started. My clinical co-founder is Dr. Darius Mushfeghi, head of retina at Stanford. And he told me, I saw a baby today, too late, can't do anything. If they had only shown up earlier. Like that's the kind of story that's with that conversation we got started. And I said, why don't you do it earlier? And the rest is relatively simple. And so, yeah, and why am I doing this? Because, I mean, actually not about me personally, but I find that the ophthalmology community is particularly, like there are certain communities within medicine that are more open to having AI assistants and tools than others. I'm not sure whether you guys have found that, but the ophthalmology community is open to that, welcomes it. So if you want to get something out into the world, I think we have something here that people might use, right? So, and so I leave it at that. I mean, my own story is I teach myself what I need to know, but I'm not a clinician. And that final comment is you always, like, I'm really happy to have my co-founder who is a strong, pretty famous clinician. And so you always need that sort of founder team that complements each other. I mean, if I've learned one thing in startups is that don't do it, most times you need a you need partners. You need people who are completely different from you. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, when we started, our startup is in ophthalmology field, but when we started, we didn't have an ophthalmologist in the team. So after someone joined our team, he's a very talented doctor of 15 years of experience in glaucoma and retina specialist. Wow, we really were missing a lot. So he brought us a different dimension. That's completely amazing. So that's great. Thank you. I mean, I understand a lot because we do the similar things, and people are really asking images from us, because we are taking images of eye when you put the contact lens. So, but we don't have yet that million images, but hopefully we have million images, and we are open to collaboration with AI companies to understand more on different diseases.
We should chat sometime.
Yeah. So, interestingly, you pointed out a lot of diseases can be also found out by looking at AI images through eye. I mean, we always say eye can tell a lot, but do you believe that we be able to diagnose a lot of diseases through the eye? Is it possible? Like I've seen studies in diabetes, cardiovascular. How do you think of that?
Oh, I'm extremely optimistic, right? Probably the biggest application is diabetic retinopathy in my world, which affects many, many millions of people across the world. It's definitely a working AI solution. And like you said, there's cardiovascular risk where we have strong indication it works. Neurodegenerative indications seem to be there. So it's kind of a nice assay. So I am a little wary, just from habit now, about the term diagnose. I think technologically and culturally or regulatory, we're at the point where we can help people do better diagnosis. We have shied away from saying, yes, we can diagnose many, many diseases. It's a little bit like, I mean, all of us on some level are involved in diagnostics, right? And so we're pretty aware of the fact that before you diagnose something, you have to be sure that it gets it right, it doesn't miss things, etc. And so there's a delicate balance there. And I think we're going there, and maybe I don't want to predict in a few years. But right now, we love the fact that we're actually supporting doctors, right? We're making it super easy for them to make decisions. But I'm open to, I mean, I guess there are two questions. We can see a lot in the retina. We just don't want to diagnose until we have seen, I think you brought it up, 2 million images at least before you sort of start making diagnoses.
There's also one question coming in from the community about whether the images that we acquire are OCT images.
Ours don't. It's just, if you're looking, I actually am deeply interested in OCT, but it's a little harder to do. And just as a notion aside, I see more movement in terms of building better, faster, cheaper cameras that can take fundus images of the retina rather than OCT. So that's my take on that. We're just moving faster in that space.
And I like how you kind of talked about, rather than using the word diagnosis, it's a great screening tool or platform that you're developing so that you can get that patient to the clinician in time before they have permanent loss of vision, which is of course one of the most important senses that we have. Do you view any other kind of future potential roles for these types of baseline images that you get in all the neonates, for example, down the road, were they to develop maybe a non-congenital disease, for example, retinal hemorrhages from shaken baby syndrome or something like that? Are there potential implications where having such information from the baseline can help as a reference point for any future changes that may occur for these patients?
Oh, absolutely, right. many of the things you mentioned though are relatively rare, right? So they're really the study size you would need to see enough and be confident about sensitivity and specificity will be very large. But in principle, these are, from what I've learned, right? You should really talk to a clinician, and they have very distinct sort of fingerprints or signatures in the retina. So you can learn how to do that and make a diagnosis, which would be even better at some point. But yeah, we're probably need 100,000 babies to go through your system and have them all evaluated, which is not difficult if you have time, right? I mean, but yeah, I think there are many things we can do with this. And I look at our company really as a first step, and we will add product lines as we can in order to make those decisions, right? Or help people assess them. But yeah, I mean, if I were to be a bit sort of overconfident but controversial, I think ultimately these neural networks, especially if you build a dedicated one that works well for the retina, can do things humans actually cannot do. Like if you have a complex image like that, I think these things will ultimately outperform what a human can do. Google has done some preliminary work that indicates that too, right? I mean,
right. And I think, also practically speaking, we are limited as, humans in terms of what we can perceive and detect, in a kind of limited amount of time. When a busy ophthalmologist is reviewing multiple scans, they're looking for certain key features of it. Whereas, as you're mentioning, a neural network can really look at multiple dimensions that we may not be able to even perceive and come up with new insights. Then to, again, like you mentioned, help the ophthalmologist to do their daily work. So I think that's a really important point.
Yeah, and I mean, this is not about the business side of things, but one of the nice things about AI is the fact that, if you live in a relatively remote area or just far away from a university hospital, you might not get access to the human expert that can help you. But an AI travels everywhere, right? I think that's actually one, and other people are in a better position, but as we move, as telemedicine, because of COVID-19, becomes more acceptable and there's more openness to sort of the remote screening, etc., I think COVID has in some ways been a boon for bringing AI into the real world.
I also wonder, you have a deep like multi-omics types of backgrounds as well. Do you envision kind of incorporating some of that data? Like, let's say that's a part of some of the electronic medical record, let's say going earlier even for the parents. Could you envision maybe in the future being able to say, oh, this child is more highly predisposed to develop a condition like this versus another? Or is that not something that there's current markers for?
I'm super excited about that. So I think there's going to be sort of a perinatal care package in a way where you're going to sequence possibly the whole genome of the baby, or a little more expensive and further in the future, parents too. And so you might basically look at that plus the medical record as the baby is born. And especially if you want to go into the diagnosis field, suddenly you're in a position to say, well, this baby might have a predisposition. One of the interesting things about ocular diseases is they often have genetic components that we can detect. So I'm sort of AI agnostic. I like to use AI to look at all kinds of information. It doesn't have to be an image, could be the sequence of a genome or other things that we see just as the baby's born. And I do like, I mean, this is also a question to you guys. I like the idea of sort of in this case, a perinatal care package, where you're saying the baby is born and we're going to think out of the box a little bit as to how we use the information that comes in, rather than, this is somewhat, it's going to take a lot of time to convince the regulatory agencies that these kind of things can work. But I think, what do you think?
I think, as you mentioned, there's already a kind of foundational substrate for this because, by multiple different state policies or national policies, there are certain parts of that toolkit that have already been built, and you can try to add on to them. You take the, fingerprints, footprints, the audiology exams, in certain contexts, some screening for various blood disorders, that are done routinely as soon as the, baby is born. And so I think you already have that foundational aspect on which you could show the added value of the kind of technology and work that you're doing.
I look forward to that with help.
We discussed with Matthew last week. There is also resistance from part of the community, especially in different medical communities. Although he says, oh, the specificity and sensitivity is great, but still you have a hard to convince someone that is useful. What do you think that is that the case in ophthalmology, or people are more optimistic in here?
Sorry, what was his main? Sorry, I missed one thing. But what is his main concern?
So the main concern, people don't trust the AI, and especially the medical space, especially traditional doctors has been trained in technology 30, 40 years. AI is very new. So what do you think about that?
I can see both sides. I've heard actually both sides. So I think and let's break the problem into two sections, right? I think I see a lot of consensus that younger doctors and doctors trained more recently are much more comfortable getting information from images or scans or other technologies. So I think they're, less comfortable doing a stethoscope and listening to things or so on and so forth. So I think that's a good sign, because that means images, scans, X-rays, etc., become far more acceptable. And I actually think but I think we, in ophthalmology in particular, people are quite open to that. I know many of them now, and it's a field where there's a chronic shortage of trained people. So, and then of course, so I think as if we deliver it right and give doctors the tools that enable them to provide good healthcare, then I think we can make progress in that direction. I mean, you might have read Eric Topol's Deep Medicine work, where I think he lays out a very nice vision of how AI and medicine can sort of cooperate in terms of providing better care. So yeah, I think, but yeah, I think, as I said in the beginning, certain subdisciplines or subsections of medicine are much more open than others. And we'll just have to see. But it's such a nice tool, right? It really helps. And if you're tired or in other ways overwhelmed or busy, having sort of an AI assistant can be very, very useful. And then, sorry if I'm rambling, but I also think payers and insurances like the idea of having an AI evaluation, because it may reduce liability, etc. So in the United States in particular, the forces that drive medicine are complicated, right? So on some level, we will have to see who sees the benefit. And if it saves money, often, right? If it saves money, we might be able to have an easier time getting to people to support it. But in our case, actually, I mean, it's a rare case, but I mean, I think the parents are really keen to know about the baby's eyes, right? I mean, it's not been a hard one to explain why we're doing this. It's not that complicated to say, we just want to make sure your baby's eyes are safe, right? If you're trying to subtype for different type of diabetes or something like that, it becomes more complicated to explain to the patient.
Sure, I guess kind of building on what you just said, this is kind of a unique subset for like the infant, the very early pediatric patient that like the parents, like you mentioned, are gonna, they're willing to do anything to get the best possible care, maybe even more than themselves for the child. And so it seems like I was wondering from a different angle, do you think that the parents' persuasion of, maybe this AI might make it better, or, it does make it better, do you think that pushes the medical system to be more open to it, even though there's other, regulatory and the standard concerns? Do you think this element also has an influence on uptake?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in a very cynical way, medicine is a business, right? So if you can increase your business, that's a good thing. And so I think what we're doing is actually good, because the pediatric ophthalmologists will get more business, so to speak, but it will enable them to save vision, which is not a bad thing for a doctor to do. In the regulatory, I mean, what I'm learning is it's also important for regulatory approval. So you obviously have to do good clinical work. You have to get buy-in from the academies, the medical academies. And it really helps in terms of regulatory approval and understanding and support if you have actual patients asking for this. So I think in some ways I learned a lot from working with regulatory agencies as to how to, assess whether we're doing the right thing and how to communicate that. And I suspect that. Sorry.
I agree with that. I can give you a personal experience. My son has some condition in eye, and we have to get it checked, especially during COVID. In regular time, it takes 3 months to take an appointment. But during COVID, that's pushed back. And 6 months, we couldn't get it checked. I really want to know what is going on, even if it is 80% accurate, because I want to monitor routinely. So it's really a concern. What is the, getting a very 99% assessment in every 6 months is better? Or you take the 1 month and you get 80% assessment. So I think that has to be concerned for the FDA as well, because there is a really immediate need for a lot of technologies like yours.
Actually, I find that intriguing what you just said, because there's the medical and the regulatory and the data science aspect. I mean, I think this would be a very interesting project to say, okay, we're going to do a test that has some errors, but we're going to be able to do it, like you said, every few weeks, every 3 months, as opposed to one that is absolutely perfect, but relatively few people can get it, right? That's a nice data science problem. But I think in terms of proving that, we want to model this, what happens if we do AI-based telemedicine type of tests more frequently than doctor visits that might be more accurate. And then I think we as data scientist community, we take that to the FDA and say, here we have some suggestions as to how we take these things forward. And we give you some tools or some examples of how data can be used to make a regulatory decision. Just an idea. I mean,
it's a great point. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, at the end of the day, we also want to take good care of the patients, right? I mean, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I think on the medical side of things, from a diagnostic test interpretation perspective, our biggest fear is a false negative. And so it is true. I mean, if there are false positives, then we can just confirm, well, that was a false positive, nothing to worry about, and reassure the family. But indeed, if you do have a fixed false negative rate of any diagnostic, and you're able to test it multiple times, like you're saying frequently, you're able to try to get better accuracy of your diagnostic test, especially if it's more practicable to do so, especially in the era of this COVID-19. So I think it's really important insight. One question I had is, given that both Jochen and Murat, you're kind of in the eye space, let's say, you already talked about a toolkit for newborns or a perinatal toolkit. Could there be just an eye toolkit, just for, looking at different components of the eye? So you're talking about the retina, you're talking about intraocular pressure, et cetera. So trying to merge together these various physiological properties of the eye to get a better understanding of, what they are inherently as eye disease, but then also what they may predict or reflect about what's going on in the brain or other parts of the body, cardiovascular, diabetes, etc.
I am totally in. I mean, I would like to do that, and we should talk, because Stanford's actually a good place to do that in terms of what's already there, in terms of people working on this and expertise. So, I mean, but by no means limited to Stanford. But I think, yeah, I think as personally, I'm not a specialist, right? I want to see all the data and see whether we can do better by integrating across many disciplines. So if there's ever an opportunity to do something, we should do it, right? And build a kit. And once we have a kit, it can also be deployed in many places, and we can learn from that.
Yep. I think what Chirag said, we understand the smart lens. We know that if you have millions of images, because people are gonna image the IOP at home, it's great. But it will take a while to get it in, like we are in clinical stage, it will take a while. But before that, I say, maybe we should just look at the eye in different fields. Look at the glaucoma patient's eye, look at the glioblastoma patient's eye, and some other conditions. We actually started to collaborate on different companies before we have that tool ready, because everyone will have to take the picture because of IOP. But maybe while you're taking them, we may take more ideas like yours. We can find out more conditions, more biomarkers, image biomarkers, I say imaging biomarkers, is interesting AI biomarkers. We may figure out on that. Definitely, that's one of our goals in this talks, especially on the first two. I know that there are a couple collaboration opportunities emerge from our talks. I can assure you that. But that's why we want to bring different communities together, between the audience, between the speakers. It'd be great. So something I have, my question for follow up the earlier discussion. I mean, Ryan has been in Precision Center and working with Pine. And do you guys, any work on the ophthalmology? Do you guys look at the eyes, especially like Google-based study you were in? Do they look into eye?
Yeah, I believe there's some OCT imaging. I would say there was something that we'd like to build up as part of the research portfolio. It's one of the things, kind of like how you're saying, like in terms of your disease, like data agnostic. We're also disease agnostic, so we go after pretty much everything that there is an opportunity to go after. So it's definitely something that we're interested in and would like to push forward. But yeah, there's not a huge push, I think, in that particular area from our investigators at the moment. But yeah, like you said, as this is a platform to open collaborations, we're certainly open to expanding that.
And same for Chirag in like neurological diseases. I believe there will be a lot of predictors in the retina. Do you agree with it, or do you have any thoughts on it?
Well, I think certainly for neuro-ophthalmologic processes, that's certainly the case. And then of course, if you think about systemic diseases, endocrine problems like diabetes, that affect so many organ systems, including the brain. These could potentially serve as early biomarkers, like you're saying, early imaging biomarkers that give us some concern, so we can start monitoring perhaps, if the patient has some early changes in their retinal scans. Could this be a sign of, glucose intolerance or diabetes or something like that? And as you know, one of the biggest challenges we have in the neurological space is dementia and dementing disorders, particularly Alzheimer's disease, et cetera, where at this point we aren't able to make a gold standard diagnosis, unfortunately, until the patient dies and we have an autopsy, so we can look at the brain tissue and confirm, that there are pathological features there. And unfortunately, a lot of changes begin decades prior to the clinical onset of symptoms that are concerning for a dementing process. So again, I think there's just so much that we don't know, and these large data sets can perhaps over time show some kind of association or causality that could give us new insights into how we predict and anticipate and maybe intervene to prevent certain neurological disorders.
Yeah, that's great. So I have a question for you, John. So if you you need to train your data in AI, so how hard to get the like a samples of newborns for you? Will you be able to collect good samples from different parts of the world?
In fact, yeah. I mean, to be totally honest, that's one of the things that makes Pr3vent work. We actually have an unusually large database. Well, we have very nearly 400,000 images from newborns that were collected by some of the people involved in founding the company. So we actually have we have the three components you need. We have the data that are relevant. We have experts, human experts that can provide top-notch labeling. And then we have the tools to translate that into a good product. It's my simplistic version of how we're doing this. But yeah, I mean, the very, very old garbage in, garbage out thing, right? The data is so important, but it's not the only thing, but it's really important. Which is why I'm sort of quietly hoping that we can continue this discussion about sharing data across different groups and so on, because I think there's tremendous tool set out there now that can be used once we bring the data together. I am involved in some ALS projects, and that community has impressed me by bringing together many different data sets and different people. And so I think maybe we should do something similar like that for the eye.
Yeah, and every new technology will make it better than before. So data comes in, your accuracy, your sensitive specificity will improve. That's the fantastic thing about data science. So.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna honor my, I was trained as at least in part, a statistician. So as long as your data doesn't introduce confounding factors, but that's the beauty of AI. Actually, it's pretty good at dealing with that, right?
And there's a question here, a couple of related questions from the community. One is the camera in a smartphone good enough to do any diagnostics of the eye? To look at the retina, is it just a matter of positioning the camera in the right place, or are special optics needed? And then another related question is, do you know of any consumer-grade ophthalmologic apps that take advantage of convenient hardware like laptops, smartphones, or cameras, presuming it won't be the same quality image data, but to monitor more obvious markers? And this person that's asking is as an app and wearable product researcher.
Okay, I'll give you a quick answer, right? And my take on this. There's nothing out there right now that would take an image of the retina on a smartphone. That said, I think that the actual capability exists, and in terms of the cameras are good enough. An adapter might do this. And so I actually am very optimistic they will be doing this with very small devices. The cameras already, there's an active world of technology development, building smaller, more versatile cameras that are easier and easier to use. And frankly speaking, if I were to be completely blunt, moving this from a camera that's done in a center or in a hospital or a clinic to a smartphone is going to be a regulatory decision. Right. I mean, if you have dealt in that world, you will realize that. But also, it's super hard to work with smartphones on some level. It's, of course, really easy for the consumer, but there's so many different cameras. They change sometimes every 6 months. Right. And so in my personal experience, that is a problem. I mean, it's wonderful that the cameras are getting better, but you basically have to retrain or at least evaluate whether you're doing okay every time there's a new model phone out, and there are a lot of them, right? But that said, I mean, there are people at Berkeley, for instance, who've done wonderful things with smartphone cameras, building diagnostics, not for the eye, but not yet. Long story short.
Oh, sorry. Actually, I was going to say, well, Murat, you actually kind of have another take on kind of addressing this solution into measuring intraocular pressure with your smart lens. So maybe, maybe you could speak about kind of another way of going about this. You can leverage the camera to take image of another secondary device that can amplify signals. I mean, that's another.
Good point. We actually do that. There are two ways we do it. One is just a regular camera image, which is not perfect to take the retina, but our goal is not to take the retina in there. Our goal is to look at the microfluidic channels inside the lens, which is more easier. But the retina images, recently we added the adapter, as you say, it takes the perfect image of the retina. I say it's perfect for us, but it's always can get better. So we added a really good adapter. Now we do all the clinical studies because we want to correlate the IOP, retina, and other things together, and it adds a value. So it can go both ways. Just IOP, regular camera is good. For regulatory perspective, you say the problem is new cameras are great, but not everyone has a new camera. So you have to get a permission for every new camera. So that really adds a concern. Let's say Apple has a new phone, but they remove one component, it's really key for you. So some optic component, and then that's why FDA just say you have to get for every type. It's a lot of work for every type actually, but that is one of the bottlenecks. Good. I mean, we are coming to end, but I have a question on investment space. So you went out, I don't know how you get investment, but people, you say AI in healthcare. How do investors look at it? Are they more open than compared to other fields, or they have more concerns?
Are you asking me? Yeah.
Yes, you're the only one who got the AI investments.
Okay.
So.
Well, at least that gives me a small edge on term. Okay, so I think actually I can give you my own experience and what I hear from other people. So clearly the health AI space is actually one where people are looking to invest. It's surprising, right? But it's not surprising because I think there's tons of potential. There are two types of people, I think, as always. We were lucky, and I'm very happy with the fact that our investors are both knowledgeable and strategic, which means they understand AI and the ophthalmology space, which I really, really appreciate. And then there are bigger players that are looking for just anything, right? Coming more from the AI tech space. Also very good, often clearer. So I think at the end of the day, you need both. You need people who can help you roll this out and really build big technological solutions, but you need them both. But I wouldn't say it's easy to raise money, never is, right? But if you get your ducks in a line and you actually have a business, AI is an attractive space. People know what it's capable of. They have a sense that it's capable of even more. So, but at the end of the day, it's not. It's the business. The business proposal, the problem you are solving, and whether you have any kind of credibility as a team to solve it. Right? I mean, every VC or investor would probably confirm that for you at the end of the day. But I love working in it. I mean, personally, I like the fact that sometimes you can use AI to really make a contribution to the world, especially in health AI. And so I like the fact that we can actually, help make the world a better place, so to speak, as opposed to help advertising or guide political campaigns, which I've been asked to do at some point too. I mean, if you can analyze data, people are getting interested in what you can do with it, right? I mean,
right.
But in medical AI, let's not get sidetracked. The wonderful thing is usually we make a contribution that's measured in patient outcome, which is really good.
And earlier in our conversation, you talked about a possible silver lining, of COVID-19 in regard to, the need to really look for means to help patients with their screening and diagnostics, et cetera. As it pertains to the aspect of fundraising and trying to pitch your ideas, have you noticed any kind of trends or any suggestions that you might have in regards to how do you do this through Zoom now when you can't actually be in person with a group of VCs or potential investors? How has that changed the dynamics of people that are inventors, entrepreneurs that are trying to raise funds for these important causes like Pr3vent and others?
I mean, long story short, there's healthy interest in health AI. There's even more interest in anything that can fit into a telemedicine framework. Certainly, we have talked to some investors that came out of the blue, found us since COVID has started, but you can back that up. There are pretty strong numbers for telemedicine investment in early 2020, if you want, independent confirmation. And the other thing I find kind of interesting as an aside is the medical tourism space, which also likes these kind of solutions. I am not an expert in this, but it seems to be a very large space and money seems to be available for doing things that helps, I prefer to call it democratize, making good quality service available to everyone. But I mean, medical tourism means you can get excellent top-notch service, perhaps in a cheaper clinic somewhere in another country even.
Well, I think it's a good point because you also talked about the insurers and them being an important part of the adoption of any of these technologies. And as you know, there are certain insurers that are willing to pay for a plane ticket to send their patients the patients that are insured by them to another state or even another country to get a certain procedure done at a high level, like you mentioned, with trained professionals, and then return back to where the patient lives. And the insurance company saves money on that plan versus having the patient get the care taken care of at a local facility. So I think that's a really important point.
I did not know that. I did not know that. It's fascinating.
Yes, exactly. It's just in terms of you also alluded to earlier, patients that may live in rural areas or just any kind of underserved area in general. How insurance companies calculate costs and savings could certainly be shifted, as these additional platforms for AI in healthcare come on board.
And it's a very real problem because, I mean, quite apart from the insurance perspective, as populations are aging and so on and so forth, and healthcare is becoming very expensive, this is a part of medicine that is also valuable, making it just more affordable realistically, I think.
I guess another thing in terms of like accessibility and benefit is, do you look at have data sets on different races and in terms of, maybe different pigmentations of the eye or different, so that there's accessibility to maybe underserved populations or, other potential patients that could benefit this? Because I think for a lot of our studies, it's a lot of times the demographic tends to be skewed in a particular direction. And so it's nice to kind of have a broad ranging data set, but hard to get sometimes.
Oh yeah, you asked me this earlier. So let's be clear. Not only do we have many images, we have them from many different places and different ethnicities. And it's enabled us to do a little bit of work that, there are notions out there that darker skinned people have more pigmentation in the retina, which has not been confirmed to my knowledge in any real study. And so this is a little sort of side point. I always feel that people think you can just, open a Jupyter notebook and build a neural network that's ready for prime time. So there's a lot of work that goes into that, and you should judge an AI by. So we, for instance, took great care to compensate for that as much as possible. And in the process, we are now putting together data that might be for the first time provide a quantitative assessment of whether any of that is true. And the wonderful thing is, if you get a product out into the real world and you continue collecting data, we can learn a lot. It is poorly so that, just as an amusing example, we don't know very much about the retina, even though we know how it works, right? Because until recently, I heard people say the retina doesn't change all that much as you age. On the other hand, there's a Stanford paper out in the last 6 months or last year that shows that you can estimate the age of a person by looking at a fundus images within 2 years with great accuracy. Right? So only one of those can be really true. And so, you know, this is a more philosophical point. As we start moving into AI and getting more data that's analyzed by data scientists and AI, we can start asking these questions that are presently based on the intuition or gut feeling of a few experts. But yeah, you know, I think what I know about the baby that everybody knows is the pupil is smaller, the shape of the eye, the size of the eye is a little different. So you need to adapt for that, but I think we're learning that different ethnicities seem to have slightly different retinas. But I wouldn't want to, you know, I'm a scientist on some level, and we need to, before we make claims like that, we should be very clear as that we can back it up.
That's great. Maybe I can ask the last question someone asked. So when are we going to see your product in market?
Within a year from now, I think is where we're headed. Like it'll be in several, milestones for this kind of thing. Regulatory approval, clinical studies already set, right? And then, yeah, I think we have essentially recruited 20 hospitals that will probably offer this at first. And from there, I think it's a question of getting it into the hospitals. But and that's actually where people like you come in, or any parent or any person who believes that there's a role for this. If people ask for it, hospitals will get it. It's not actually difficult to do, right? I mean, but yeah, actually, it's good to know. Kind of good. Within in a year from now, we will be maybe, hopefully, very, very close to having this in many hospitals.
And especially during COVID time, it's the best chance. We don't want to go anywhere, especially the hospitals, to take some images, you know. So
well, the babies are still born on the newborn ward most of the time, but at least there's no extra trips, right? It happens.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to do additional trips, especially for serious problems. You just have to monitor at home. That's great. So it was a really great, insightful conversation, and every week we learn something new. And I'm really, I got so many new ideas in here as well. I learned so much new, and thank you for everyone to attend. And I believe people liked as well. We're gonna actually put that on podcast as well, other than other YouTubes. So hopefully people enjoy. I actually keep checking the participants in the Zoom channel. People just stay. Whoever joined, they stay for the last 1 hour. Thanks for everyone. And I wish happy 4th of July. So enjoy the weekend.
Happy
Thank
4th
you so
of
much.
July.
Happy 4th of
And
July.
let's
Thank
be
you
in
so
touch
much.
because I am really, really curious to learn more.
Yeah, I think we should arrange a different meeting among us. Let's do that.
And any of the listeners who are really interested. Anyway,
great.
Have a great weekend.
You too. Thanks so
Take
much.
care. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.